right. Hello, everybody out there in the tubes of the internet, and welcome to another wonderful edition of This Week in Space. I'm your host with the most, Jonah Emerson Bell. I like to show up every Monday to give you the breakdown of the astrological weather to help you to know whether to bring an umbrella or to take a Valium. And yeah, how's everybody doing out there? Last week was pretty spicy. We had the eclipses where we had an eclipse. We had the beginning of the year of the fire horse. We had the Saturn Neptune conjunction. It was pretty full on. And fortunately, we have a little bit of a lighter week in space, less astro weather going on, but I think we will be revisiting some of the themes from last week. And, some of what made last week so intense. Some of what made last week so intense was the eclipse and the Saturn Neptune conjunction. And I think I mean, these things will unfold over longer periods of time. We are kind of up in the eclipse portal right now. The second one, I believe, happening on March the 3rd, but don't quote me on that. And the Saturn Neptune conjunction occurs every 35 to 37 years. So that will continue to unfold, even though that conjunction perfected. The sort of ramifications of that will continue to be felt and reverberate. And yeah, Simone Henry saying, need a Valium here in Mexico for sure. Yeah, I hope you are safe and I hope you're doing all right. I think that's one of the things that I caught in the news that seemed pretty spot on with the archetype of the Saturn Neptune conjunction was the assassination of the head of the Jalisco cartel, which erupted into violence around Mexico. Pretty intense. The other thing that I noticed was the same day that the Saturn Neptune conjunction perfected, the Trump tariffs were struck down by the Supreme Court. And I don't know. I think that this is a seeding moment and these things will continue to unfold. And I think it's really important to stay cool, calm, and collected wherever we can and not to get dysregulated. Oh, damn. And Simone Henry saying 250 car bombs here yesterday and instant cartel war. That's intense. That is some intense business. And yeah, I hope everybody out there is staying safe in Mexico and everywhere because it seems like things are popping off all over the globe. And again, like thinking about the ways that we can resource ourselves and resource each other. And one of the things that I also wanted to address because, again, the astrology of last week was pretty full on. The vibe of last week felt really kind of overwhelming. I don't know about y'all, but with the Saturn Neptune conjunction, I talked about the sort of destabilizing of structures and the dissolving of systems, and also the reality check of both Saturn and Neptune coming to form this conjunction at the 0 degree of Aries, which is the point where the equinox happens. And I think that there's this interesting component of that where the equinox point is a point of balance. It's where the day and the night are of equal length, during the spring equinox. And, so this 0 degree of Aries point is encoded with this idea of balance. And it feels to me like we're living in a world that is drastically out of balance. And with this conjunction occurring here, it is perhaps an invitation to consider the ways that we can begin to rebalance these systems. And I believe that this begins in our internal world, which is very hard when there's a lot of chaos and overwhelm existing in the external world. But to find the ways that we can plant the seed to rebalance our internal ecosystem and from that point of resource, how we can bring that out into the world and begin to do the work little by little to rebalance the external world wherever we are called to do so. And the other kind of component of this is Neptune is a planet of fantasy and dream, and Saturn is a planet of reality. And so, one of the things that I think can happen, one of the invitations, is to consider the ways that we can begin to structure the dream that we are holding for ourselves and for the world. And help to bring the imagination, the dream, the vision into physical reality through the dedication and hard work and consistency that Saturn asks for and sometimes demands. And, I think that we have been living into a dystopian view of the future for a really long time that has been constructed for us through sci-fi novel or sci-fi stories and through sort of technocrat I don't know, vision. And I think it's an opportunity for us to really tune into what is my dream for the future? What is my dream for the present? What is my dream for the world? And then what is the work that I need, that I can put in to help to make that dream a reality? And Carolyn Casey, one of my favorite astrologers, has this quote that I absolutely love, is that imagination lays the track for the reality train, and to really tune into that imaginal quality, that vision, to help to structure the reality that we are living into and stepping into. And Gina Maria saying Saturn Neptune conjunction is squaring her Saturn, so everything feels blurry and fuzzy and unclear. Yeah, I think that was the vibe of last week for sure, and definitely with a healthy dose of overwhelm and some emotional dysregulation. So, before I jump into the astrology of the week, I just want to mention that I'll be co-facilitating an Oracle Dream Retreat in Greece with the brilliant Sarah Janes. This is going down May 8th through 15th. And in this retreat, we will visit several ancient sites, including Delphi and Epidavros, and explore the precognitive power of dreams. And so, if y'all are interested in that, I would love to see you in Greece because it's going to be amazing. You can go to themysteries.org and check out the retreats page, or follow Sarah Jane's Dreaming on the Instagram. And yeah, she puts out a lot of pretty amazing content there as well. So might as well give her a follow. And what's up, Jeff? Congratulations to Jeff Hinshaw, who just the Cosmic Cousins, who just dropped the Travel Tarot, which I got a copy of, and it's beautiful. And if you are a traveler or want to travel, I highly recommend checking out the Travel Tarot because it's pretty spot on. So thanks for doing that, Jeff, and congratulations on getting that out. Okay. We are looking at this week in space for February the 23rd, 2026 to March the 1st, 2026. So away we go. I want to start by going over some old business because yesterday or last week, you know, last week was pretty full up with the eclipses in the Saturn Neptune conjunction. And one of the things that I skipped over is that the sun entered Pisces last Wednesday, February the 18th. And I just wanted to spend a moment contemplating the archetype of Pisces because Mercury will be stationing retrograde in that sign this week. We'll talk about that in a minute. But the sun's ingress into Pisces occurred right after the new moon in Aquarius, which was that solar eclipse that I'm sure you all felt. This was also the first day of Ramadan and Ash Wednesday and the beginning of Lent. And the Lenten period occurs during Pisces season. And this makes sense to me because Pisces is the last sign before the spring equinox, making it the mutable sign that falls at the bitter end of winter. Mutable signs are the transition from one season to the next. So they are wrapping up the business of one season and ushering us into the next one. And so, as Pisces occupies the space of the very end of winter, This is the time in pre-industrial societies where food stores would have been running really low. And it's before the time when new crops could be planted or wild foods could be foraged. So uh, Pisces season was a time of fasting. And fasting can bring up deep emotions and feelings of transcendence, as well as facilitating spiritual experiences. And, as the food stores are running low, like everybody is hungry, everybody is starving, no one is eating, there's nothing to forage. And then religions came in and institutionalized the practice of fasting because everybody was doing that anyway. And so, as we go into hunger, as we sort of fast, as we don't eat as much, it brings up these emotions and it brings up this kind of transcendental experience. And I've heard it said that God recognizes all those who fast, and I kind of love that. And all this to say, many of the themes associated with the sign of Pisces are also related to the time of the season where there was often hunger, which again has become institutionalized by religious systems as a time of fasting and meditation and spiritual connection. And I don't know. I'm not Catholic, but I do like the idea of institutionalized fasting periods because I think it can be really valuable to give something up and to see what it's like to live without something. And so I try and fast during the Lent period, but I don't, my fast is more like giving up something. And the thing that I chose to give up this year is scarcity. And I think this is really helpful because if I'm feeling that tension of scarcity, I get to be like, okay, I'm not doing this now. If I really need to feel this scarcity, I can do it in 40 days. And what I have found through this practice for myself is when I give up something like that, I realize that 40 days later, I don't actually really need to feel it. And so I don't know, it's just something to consider as y'all are moving through this Piscean period. If there are things that you want to give up that maybe are not so helpful, and you can just put that to the side until Easter and then reconsider if it's that important. So, Pisces is a Jupiter ruled sign, which is looking to expand into the vast reaches of everything. Jupiter, a planet of expansion. Pisces is sort of unbounded. So it's like, how big can I get? How much can I include? And in this expansion, Pisces becomes kind of diffuse and porous. It is seeking unification and to kind of dissolve into a larger body or the great ocean of consciousness. And as a water sign, it deals with emotions and the connection to the larger collective through the experience of our personal emotions. For example, if you've ever felt grief or heartbreak or joy, these are your personal experiences of universal emotions. And when you experience grief, for example, which is an uncomfortable emotion, it connects you with all beings everywhere who are experiencing that emotion in this moment. And so, um, also all beings everywhere who have ever experienced the feeling of grief. And so Pisces reminds that emotions provide a gateway into connection. And we can actually try this out right now if you want to join me. And so just see for a moment if you can conjure an image that brought you joy. And just notice what that feels like to kind of touch into that feeling of joy. And now consider all of the other beings on the planet who are experiencing joy in this moment. Maybe they're having a cup of coffee in the sun on a spring morning, or having dinner with a loved one, or watching their children play. And your experience of joy in this moment connects you with all of these other beings everywhere that are also experiencing joy right now. And this is how Pisces operates. It is the single drop of emotion that we get to experience that connects us to the ocean of emotion that we are all swimming in. And so I just wanted to bring that in as some of the Piscean themes that I've been considering over the past week, which Brings us to Wednesday, February the 25th. We have Mercury stationing retrograde in Pisces at 22 degrees and 33 arc minutes of that emotional, mutable, watery sign. So, Mercury, the messenger, our cognitive processes, the way that we gather and process information and communicate our experience, will be retrograde until March the 20th, when they will station direct at 8 degrees and 29 minutes of Pisces, which oddly enough was the position, that was the location of the North Node during the solar eclipse, which occurred last week on February the 17th. So, interesting little connection there. And I think with Mercury's retrograde, we will be revisiting some of the themes that came up during that eclipse and during this whole eclipse portal, because Mercury will be retrograde for a chunk of that. And, in the, I don't want to say pop astrology, but maybe the current collective astrology, Mercury retrograde is has been billed as something to fear. And Chris Warnock, who is a brilliant astrological magician, said something that has always stuck with me. He was like, as we have moved into a more modern astrology, we have kind of lost the sense of the malefics, but that like difficult energy needs to go somewhere. And so it's been put into Mercury retrograde as this like, oh no, Mercury's in retrograde, everything's going to go wrong. And I actually don't think that's the case. It is a challenging period for sure, but there is great value in it and great lessons. And so, yeah, again, with Mercury stationing retrograde this week, we will be revisiting themes from last week, which is kind of a bummer because last week was a lot. And I'm glad that I made it through, and I kind of don't want to go back there. But I think some of the intensity of the eclipses in the Saturn Neptune conjunction will be rehashed, and we will be asked to sit with some of the feelings that those brought up in order to integrate them in some way. And I think that this is incredibly important because, we experience events, and then through reflection and being able to sit with them, we kind of integrate them as experiences and memories, and then they sort of help to become part of us and help us to learn and to navigate life. And so this is an opportunity for reflection as well as a chance to unravel some of the thoughts and fears and feelings of overwhelm that was maybe kicked up from the astrology of last week. And so Mercury helps us to process. And with the retrograde, that processing power becomes internalized. With this retrograde occurring in the mutable water sign of Pisces, the focus is on processing the water element and the emotions that have been stirred up over the past few weeks. So Mercury retrograde occurs in a different element each year. In 2024, Mercury was retrograde in fire signs. In 2025, their retrogrades began in fire with movement back into water signs. And this year, Mercury's retrograde will occur primarily in the element of water. And so water follows the path of least resistance and is always moving downwards, seeking the lowest point. It is looking to return to the source and to merge with itself and assimilate into ever larger bodies of water. Water relates to the word world through feeling. It deals with our emotional responses to our experiences. And as Mercury retrogrades this year through water signs, we are called to come into deeper connection with our feeling bodies and to revisit, reconsider, reimagine, and reevaluate the feelings we are holding and our emotional responses to what we experience. And according to Gary P. Canton, who wrote the Hermetica Triptycha, I'd hold it up, but I left it in the other room, which is a fantastic book on Mercury's retrograde cycles through an alchemical perspective. And one of the listeners mentioned it last week, but Gary says, water years are great for quiet inner preparatory work, creating new channels for emotional expression or attunement with the unconscious, for adjusting our feeling values and assessing our state of emotional happiness and contentment with our lives. He goes on to say, By practicing non-action and non-attachment to outcomes, you can allow all things to settle and coalesce of their own nature. You will more easily see the natural, harmonious connections and discard what is false or filled with strife. So, welcome to Mercury retrograde. This is Mercury's first retrograde in a water sign and the first retrograde of this year. And Mercury's retrograde begins in Pisces, which is a sign where Mercury is in their fall. Wah, wah. Because this condition is challenging, the planet is under-resourced and undervalued, which can be a difficult place for a planet to be. And one of the reasons that Mercury has such a hard time in Pisces is that they want to kind of dive deep into feelings and the information that they are receiving from the collective. And so, Mercury in Pisces kind of shows up at the Monday morning work meeting and wants to talk about their dreams and obscure esoteric wisdom that they gathered while they were logging on to Teams. And all the other people in the meeting just want to talk about what supplies they need to get for the office and if there are changes in the schedule for the week. And so Mercury in Pisces can feel like really out of place. And again, Pisces is this Jupiter ruled sign, which deals with assimilating and dissolving into a larger collective body than oneself. And Mercury in Pisces is sort of going deep into the emotional information that they are picking up. And this can be challenging because Pisces is diffuse and have very porous boundaries. And so with Mercury here, again, our thought processes and our internal narrative and the ways that we process the world. Mercury here may be picking up on some of the ambient emotional energy that we are receiving from our environment and from the collective unconscious. And this can be difficult because we may find ourselves experiencing emotions that aren't necessarily ours, especially in a time in the world where things feel unhinged and chaotic. And so during this retrograde process, it might be helpful to ask ourselves, what am I actually feeling here? And is this even my feeling? And if not, then see if you can discharge it or return it to the sender or just let it go in some way. So Mercury retrogrades are a time to slow down and to tune into the information that we are receiving from our internal world. When our lives are running smoothly and everything is going according to plan, there is not so much motivation to slow down and to tune into that inner world and that inner wisdom. However, when things get disrupted, when flights are delayed, when our technology glitches out, when the flow of life gets disjointed or disrupted, we are called to tune into a different part of our brain and to turn our awareness towards other areas of life. When things don't go according to plan, often we are left to just sit with ourselves. And this is an opportunity to sort of key into our internal world. When flights are delayed, for example, we end up sitting in the unknown, which can be really frustrating, and it can provide time for reflection and deeper connection with ourselves if we can let go of the story of, I'm going to miss this other flight. Oh my God, when am I going to get there? How is this going to work? So with Mercury moving retrograde in this water sign, it is a chance to tap into the emotional information that we're receiving from our internal world. And Mercury functions as the cognitive mind that can make up stories about what's happening, and it loves to narrate our experience. It will try and solve problems that are impossible to solve by thinking them out, or thinking them into solutions, which never works. It's not actually what our brain is designed for. Our brain is like an admin in a filing cabinet. It's not actually designed to know the answer, even though it tries so hard. And so, what is more effective is to allow ourselves to come into contact with our intuition or with the daemon, which is the spirit which guides each of us. And the daemon can be seen as our internal wisdom or higher power, whatever works for you. But whatever it is, it speaks with a small, quiet voice, which is much different than the constantly running monologue of the conscious mind. I don't know about y'all, but mine is kind of unhinged. and pretty loud. And so with this retrograde, when we run into these obstacles, when we hit snags and plans are disrupted, we can consider the ways that we can let that part of ourselves that wants to logic our way through the issue to just like the to just let it go. You know, the part that really wants to figure it out to see if we can like acknowledge that and quiet that a little bit and just see if we can come into connection with the deep mind or the intuitive wisdom or the daemon and what information that has to offer us. And one way of doing this is to turn our awareness away from the external world and the issues or problems or, scarcity or frustration and the desire to go into problem solving and to see if we can turn that awareness into the feeling we are experiencing and letting go of the story and letting go of what we are telling ourselves about what's happening because the story we are telling can pull us away from what is actually happening. The story oftentimes either pulls us into potential problems in the future that our mind is reaching out to solve, or it pulls us into the frustrations and resentments of the past. And if you think about, having a flight delayed at an airport, it's like, thinking back of like, oh my God, why did they do that? That's their fault, or like, how is this going to work? And it like either of these pulls us out of the present moment, which is the only place that we have any power and the only place that we can actually get any information about what is the next right thing to do. But if we can allow ourselves to come into this current moment, into the present, and notice the sensation we are experiencing and the information and wisdom that this sensation may have to offer us in this present moment, then we can access some of the deeper wisdom and guidance of Mercury, whose role, after all, is the psychopomp, who moves between worlds, and they can pull us into deeper connection with ourselves and the superconsciousness and grant us access to the daemon or intuitive wisdom that oftentimes is sidelined by the mind's desire to anticipate issues and fixate on problems. So, one of the benefits of this retrograde is that it can help us to tune into that felt sense we are experiencing and allow us to let go of the story we are telling ourselves about what's happening or what could happen. And through this shift of awareness, we can gain access to that deeper well of emotion and intuition that is operating below the surface of our conscious mind. Let me check the comments real quick and then we'll move on to Friday. Um, where do we, where do we look for strength right now? Because last week was really a lot. I think that's an excellent question, and I hope I addressed some of that in the Mercury retrograde bit. Being able to sort of notice the fear, or the anxiety that and the feelings of overwhelm that are produced by this current moment, and seeing if we can tune into ourselves and that inner wisdom and that small quiet voice of the daemon and then also and allowing ourselves to become resourced by that, letting go of what could happen or what might be happening or what's unfolding in the future and seeing if we can come back to the present moment because this is the only place that we actually can act from or have any agency in our lives. And then also I think community is an incredible resource for resilience and support. And so also finding areas of community connection and support from like-minded people or the people that we feel safe with or the people that we are in connection with that where we can support each other and help to resource each other. I hope that helps. So, moving on to Friday, February the 27th, we have Mars in Aquarius squaring Uranus in Taurus. This is occurring at 27 degrees and 42 arc minutes. Give me one moment. I'm just going to pull this up on the screen. I'm going to pull up the chart on the screen for the folks on the YouTube. Cool. There we go. So here we're looking at the chart for February the 27th, and we have Mars over here at 27 degrees of Aquarius, making a square, this red line right here, to Uranus at 27 degrees of Taurus. So Mars is a planet of conflict and action and courage. Uranus is the great disruptor who brings sudden change and unforeseen events in the service of dismantling old forms and creating something entirely new. Uranus is a planet of change that seeks to create freedom by disrupting the status quo. And so, with these two planets in a hard aspect like a square, it can create a lot of restlessness and a desire to take action to create change. And this tense relationship between Uranus and Mars can lead to frustration with one's current circumstances, which can cause us to act kind of impulsively. And personally, I feel like it's important to take action from a conscious place if we can. And impulsivity can lead to unforeseen outcomes, which is Uranus's jam, but may kind of leave us needing to pick up the pieces and clean up the mess that our actions have created if we are not careful. And one of the things that I've heard kind of consistently is that hard aspects between Uranus and Mars can be pretty accident prone. So just be aware of that. And I think it's the kind of restlessness leading to impulsivity, which causes us to leap before we look, which can result in accidents. So just consider that for a moment. So Uranus is connected with the Titan Prometheus, who had a gift of forethought, and he could see into the future and hold the awareness of how events would unfold. His brother, Epimetheus, had the gift of hindsight or afterthought. His superpower was he could see how events unfolded in the past and where and how he fucked up. And I think the sibling relationship is important to consider as we are moving into this highly charged transit, which may cause us to act from an unconscious or impulsive place. Uranus makes available either the forethought of Prometheus or the afterthought of Epimetheus. Ideally, a healthy mix of both. But in the moment of passion, we may want to consider which of these brothers we want to call on to lead us, the one who can see ahead or the one who can only see behind. And so Uranus tends to like chafe and buck at restrictions, and Mars is very passionate and action oriented. And if we are feeling constrained in areas of our lives, we may feel compelled to act to disrupt the structures that we feel are constraining us and to seek to fight our way out into something that feels more free or at least less constraining. So it is the places where things feel routine or stale that may cause us to rebel or struggle to liberate ourselves from what feels limiting or routine or boring. And when Mars feels bored, Mars acts out and breaks things. If we're going to break things, we want to make damn sure we're not breaking things that we're going to need later on, or be upset with ourselves for tearing down when we look back on this time with the hindsight of Epimetheus. And one thing to consider is how we can find creative solutions to deal with the issues of restriction, stagnation, and frustration, and how we can channel the revolutionary of Uranus through creativity to create the changes that we are seeking instead of becoming kind of hijacked and acting impulsively and abandoning our commitments and responsibilities or blowing up an area of our life that may be kind of important for structural integrity in the long run. So during this transit, we may find frustrations with authority figures or anyone whom you feel is restricting your freedom. Again, we want to work to find creative solutions to frustrating problems. Mars is pretty action oriented and is not really known for their ability to see their actions through. And so in this square, they may be playing the role of Epimetheus, who can only look back on the trail of destruction that they have left in their wake to get a sense of things, of how things have unfolded. However, Mars in Aquarius, which is an air sign, is about thinking outside the box. So Aquarius seeks to observe the current system in order to find ways to change and update and improve it. So Mars here may be able to approach conflict and challenge in unconventional ways. But this may require us to kind of stop and pause for a moment and consider the best course of action to help us define the desired outcome. And Uranus, again, is distant and observational. Uranus who Uranus is named after, is a sky god. So it is kind of detached and observing the unfoldings on spaceship Earth. And through that perspective, we can also find new, innovative, and revolutionary ways of approaching and working through problems that may not just be like, I'm going to charge right at it and bust through this wall. And so I think that there is some benefit to coming up with creative ways of solving the problems of frustration, or restriction or constriction. So, on a global scale, we may see disruptions or explosive actions that grab headlines. I think we're already seeing this in Mexico, as Simone Henry pointed out. And I think that these things will continue to evolve as we move through the week and get closer and closer to the Mars-Uranus square. Um, and again, it is Uranus kind of pushing for change and the need to break free from tradition and conventions and restrictive structures, and Mars acting out on these impulses, which can create disruptive events or outbursts that may spill out into the national or global stage. Something to pay attention to as well: on Saturday, February the 28th, which is the day after the Mars-Uranus square perfects, Mars will be at 28 degrees and 49 minutes of Aquarius, which is the place where we had that solar eclipse on February the 17th. So Mars, again, planet of action, heat, activity. It's a catalyst and it acts as a trigger. And it can activate the points in space where we have had charged celestial events. And so eclipses can bring shakeups and faded events. However, they don't necessarily happen all at once at the moment of eclipse. The changes that eclipses bring can unfold over long stretches of time. And as Mars moves over this eclipse point, it may ignite some of the latent energy of the eclipse and catalyze that need for change, or catalyze events that bring about what that eclipse was calling for. So pay attention on Saturday, because unconscious patterns may become visible, and the seeds that were planted during last Tuesday's eclipse may be stimulated by Mars's movement over this point. So we may see things unfold in the news or in our personal lives which were initiated by that past eclipse. Okay, that brings us to the last transit of the week, also occurring on Friday, February the 27th. On that day, we have Venus in Pisces conjunct Mercury, who is retrograde in Pisces at 22 degrees and 15 arc minutes of that mutable water sign. And let me just switch the chart over here. So yeah, here we are looking at a chart from Friday, February the 27th at 10:35 in the PM. That's Mountain Standard Time. And we have Mercury right here retrograde. The red 22 symbolizes that Mercury is in retrograde. And we have Venus over here at 22 degrees and 15 arc minutes as well. Okay, so during this conjunction, we have Mercury, who deals with thinking, communication, as well as exchange and movement, who is now moving retrograde in Pisces, which is the sign of Mercury's fall. And they are forming in conjunction with Venus, who deals with love, aesthetics, relationship, and connection, who happens to be exalted in Pisces. And this feels auspicious for Mercury, who's maybe having a hard time with their retrograde beginning in the sign of their fall, but they are making their first aspect after that retrograde station to the exalted ruler of the sign, Venus. And I feel like there is some resourcing that can happen. Um, And I feel like there is some resourcing that can happen during this conjunction to support Mercury and the mercurial parts of our lives. Where Mercury is having a hard time in Pisces, feeling like its esoteric information is kind of underappreciated, and like its logical processes are kind of lost in the fog of the diffuse Piscean landscape. with some added confusion from this week's retrograde station just thrown into the mix for fun. But Venus is exalted here. Venus is like a VIP in Club Pisces. They're chilling in the lounge, popping champagne, reading poetry, and really digging the vibe. So with this conjunction, I imagine Venus kind of inviting Mercury past the velvet rope and into the VIP area to impart some wisdom and to share some resources. And maybe this goes back to Simone Henry's question, what could that look like? So Venus appreciates and enjoys. Venus loves. Venus is a lover. And so Venus can help Mercury to get in touch with that felt sense of what actually feels good. And I think that this is a really important bit of information for this Mercury retrograde and also maybe for this week. During Mercury's retrograde through Pisces, we're doing an emotional review and reconsidering how we are feeling. Venus reminds us to tune into our values. Venus is a planet of our value system, and to connect with that felt sense of what feels good and what doesn't feel so good. And that is really valuable information because when we are lost in the fog and the cognitive senses aren't sure which way to turn, it is the internal intuitive sense of, I like this, or that doesn't feel so great, that provides an important tool to help us navigate through the shifting seas of life. We often find ourselves in situations where the information we are receiving or the stories we are telling ourselves about our experience conflicts with how it feels in our hearts or in our bodies. So, this conjunction is a threshold moment for the Mercury retrograde phase, which asks us to turn inward and to bring the heart and the mind into better alignment. Venus here reminds us to slow down and ask ourselves, how does this feel? And does it spark joy? And to consider if I am drawn towards something or repelled by something on a somatic level. And remember to check in with this and as we remember to check in with this internal compass, we find ourselves kind of wandering in the fog of life over the next few weeks during Mercury's retrograde. And I think this is a great way of calibrating this compass to go in and check in with the things that feel pleasurable, to look at art, going to see music, playing music, engaging in creative practices, reading poetry, experiencing beauty in whatever way you experience it helps you to get that felt sense of what feels good. And this can become a somatic marker that we can orient to moving forward. It's important to take the kind of the time to allow these experiences of beauty, these experiences of joy to sink in because the mind wants to kind of rush through them and go on to the next thing or go on to the next problem to solve. And humans have a negativity bias, which makes the brain like Velcro for bad experiences and Teflon for good experiences. Because we are designed in such a way to keep us alive that we are always scanning for danger. And if we see danger, then that kind of we lock that in. But if we experience good feelings, that doesn't really help us stay alive or evolve, and stand the test of time. So we have to like really impart those good experiences into our system. We have to update our system with what feels good and to really allow it to kind of like move through us or penetrate our cells so that we can hold that feeling. Thus, it creates sort of a compass point or a navigation tool because we're like, oh, that feels good. I like that. Let me move towards that because that is the way that I want to feel in the world. So on Friday, which happens to be Venus's day, you may want to practice drinking in beauty, practice breathing it in, practice soaking it up, and allow that to help calibrate your navigation tools for the coming retrograde. And see if that helps to create a point of orientation that you can return to and check in with your values around what feels good and what doesn't feel so good. because that awareness will be really helpful for letting the story go and connecting in with what actually feels right for you in this moment as you go through the Pisces retrograde emotional review. And yeah, I think that's all the astro weather that is fit to print, my friends. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope something that I said during this spiel was helpful for somebody somewhere. And I also want to mention that in times of struggle, difficulty, challenge, tragedy, it can feel challenging to allow ourselves to experience joy and to experience beauty. And I think that during times of difficulty, it is all that much more important to experience joy and beauty because, again, this is helps to provide resilience. It helps to resource us. And again, it gives us a sort of somatic marker that helps us to move towards what we want more of in our life and what we would like the world to feel like and how we want to show up for it. So, with that, my friends, I wish you all a great week in space. And I'm going to stay on the Instagram for a minute more in case anybody has any questions. And for you folks on the podcast and the YouTube, be well out there. And until next time, be good to yourselves, be good to each other. And as always, may the force be with you. All right. Bye now.